The morning sun had barely risen, yet Emma was already awake, tying her worn-out apron around her waist. She worked as a waitress in a small cafe on the corner of the street, where the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the sound of chatter and clinking cups. Every day started the same, rushing to serve customers with a smile that hid her tiredness. Emma wasn't just a waitress. She was a young woman carrying the weight of her world quietly on her shoulders. Her mother was sick and needed constant care. The hospital bills piled up faster than she could count. Every week, Emma worked extra shifts just to afford her mother's medicines. Sometimes, she skipped her own meals so she could save enough for dinner at home. Life hadn't been kind to her, but she never allowed her struggles to show. She believed that if she stayed strong and kind, good things would eventually come her way. Emma's days were long. She woke up before sunrise and didn't return home until late at night. The cafe was small but always busy with office workers, students, and people in a hurry. Her job wasn't easy. She had to deal with rude customers, clean up spills, and stand for hours with barely any rest. Yet, she always greeted everyone with a soft smile and a gentle good morning. Her coworkers admired her patience, even when some customers treated her like she was invisible. At home, things were even harder. Her mother, once strong and cheerful, now lay in bed most days. The doctor said she needed surgery, but the cost was far beyond what Emma could earn in a year. Still, Emma refused to give up. She spent nights calculating her savings, cutting down on every possible expense, and dreaming of the day she could give her mother the care she deserved. Even though her clothes were old and her shoes worn out, she carried herself with quiet pride. She never complained because she didn't want pity. She wanted hope. Sometimes, when the cafe grew quiet between shifts, Emma would sit near the counter and look out the window. She watched people rushing past. Businessmen in suits, mothers with children, and couples laughing over coffee. She often wondered what it would feel like to live without constant worry. To wake up one day and not have to count every coin in her pocket. She dreamed of finishing her studies, maybe finding a better job, something that could change her mother's and her own life. But for now, those dreams felt far away, like stars shining above her reach. Despite everything, Emma was known for her kindness. She helped the new staff learn how to handle difficult customers. She comforted crying children when their parents were busy. Sometimes, she slipped an extra cookie into a child's plate or gave away a free cup of tea to an old man sitting alone. "You'll make more from smiles than from tips," she would often say with a laugh. And though her paycheck was small, her heart was big. But deep down, Emma was tired. Her hands ached from carrying trays, her back hurt from standing too long, and her mind was heavy with worry. Each time the manager posted the weekly schedule, she hoped for a day off, but she always ended up taking extra shifts. She didn't have the luxury of rest. She told herself that working hard was her only way out, that one day all of it would be worth it. The cafe owner, Mrs. Hill, liked Emma for her reliability. "You remind me of myself when I was young," she often said. But even Mrs. Hill didn't know the full story of Emma's struggle. Nobody did. Emma kept her pain to herself. To everyone else, she was just the polite, smiling waitress who never complained, the girl who seemed content with her simple life. Every night after work, Emma would walk home through the quiet streets. Her shoes would scrape against the pavement, and her feet would throb with pain. But as soon as she reached home and saw her mother's tired smile, her heart softened. "How was work, darling?" her mother would ask weakly. And Emma would always reply with the same gentle lie. "It was good, Mama. Everything's fine." Sometimes, Emma would sit beside her mother's bed and talk about the future. "Once you're better, we'll go somewhere nice," she'd whisper, brushing her mother's hair softly. "Maybe by the sea. You'll love the ocean breeze." Her mother would smile faintly, even as tears gathered in her eyes. They both knew it was a dream, fragile and far away, but dreams were all they had. Money was always tight. When her mother's medicine ran out, Emma would borrow from friends, promising to pay them back soon. There were nights when the power went out because she couldn't afford the bills. But instead of crying, she would light a candle, make tea, and sit beside her mother, pretending everything was normal. Hope was the only thing that kept her going. Even in her darkest moments, Emma believed in goodness. She believed that being kind mattered, that maybe, just maybe, the world would notice her one day. Not for how she looked or where she came from, but for her heart. She didn't know that her small acts of kindness, her quiet strength, and her warm smile were about to catch the attention of someone who would change her life forever. The cafe, with its clattering cups and noisy chatter, was more than just her workplace. It was the stage where fate was waiting for her. She had no idea that in just a few days, a stranger would walk in, and a simple, selfless gesture from her would set off a chain of events that would rewrite her story completely. For now, she only knew that she had to keep going, keep smiling, keep working, and keep believing, because sometimes even the smallest acts of kindness lead to the biggest miracles. And as the sun set that evening, painting the sky in shades of gold, Emma whispered to herself, "One day, things will change." She didn't know that change was already on its way, wearing a suit, holding a cup of coffee, and walking straight toward her quiet little cafe. It was a cold Monday morning, and the sky was still covered with pale gray clouds. The city was slowly waking up, and so was the little cafe where Emma worked. The smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee filled the air as the first customers began to walk in. Emma tied her apron tightly, brushed a few loose strands of hair from her face, and got ready for another long day. She had been working since early morning, helping Mrs. Hill set up the counter, arrange the tables, and prepare for the morning rush. Even though her body was tired, she greeted everyone with her usual bright smile. The cafe was soon full of people in suits, students with laptops, and mothers trying to calm their kids. Cups clinked, the coffee machine hissed, and the bell over the door rang constantly. It was chaos, but to Emma it was a familiar kind of chaos. She moved quickly between tables, balancing trays and taking orders with practiced ease. "Good morning, sir. Would you like your usual?" she asked one of the regulars, placing a cup of coffee in front of him before he could even answer. The man smiled. Everyone liked Emma because she remembered their orders, their names, even their favorite pastries. Still, behind her smile, her mind was heavy. She kept thinking about her mother's medicine. She had to buy it today, and she wasn't sure if she had enough money left. Her last tip had gone toward the electricity bill. "One day at a time," she whispered to herself as she served another table. It was her little way of staying strong. In the middle of the morning rush, the doorbell chimed again, but this time it wasn't one of the usual customers. A tall man in his late 30s stepped inside. He wore a black suit that looked expensive, but his tie was slightly crooked. He seemed calm, serious, and very out of place in this simple cafe. Most people who dressed like him preferred fancy restaurants downtown, not this cozy little spot. Emma noticed him right away. Something about his quiet confidence made him stand out. The man looked around, then chose a seat near the window. He sat down, pulled out a newspaper and started reading. His face was thoughtful, almost distant, as if he was thinking about something important. Emma grabbed a menu and walked over to his table with her warm smile. "Good morning, sir. Would you like to see the menu, or should I bring you a coffee to start with?" she asked politely. He looked up from his newspaper and met her eyes for the first time. For a moment he seemed surprised by her kindness. "Coffee, please. Black," he said in a deep, calm voice. Emma nodded and turned to leave, but her eyes caught his tie again. It was slightly off-center, the knot uneven. She smiled to herself. It wasn't a big thing, but she noticed details like that easily. As she made his coffee, she couldn't help wondering who he was. His watch looked like it cost more than her entire year's salary. Maybe he was a businessman or someone important. She tried not to stare when she brought his cup to the table, setting it gently beside his newspaper. "Here you go, sir," she said softly. He thanked her with a polite nod and took a sip, still reading. For a few minutes, everything went on as usual. The cafe buzzed with noise, orders kept coming, and Emma continued her work. But her eyes kept drifting back to the man by the window. There was something about him that drew her attention. Not just his appearance, but the calmness in his eyes, the way he seemed lost in thought. When the rush finally slowed down, Emma took a deep breath. She walked past his table again, collecting empty cups from nearby. The man lowered his newspaper for a moment and caught her eye. "You seem very busy," he said with a small smile. "Always," she replied with a light laugh. "People need their coffee to survive Mondays." Her cheerful tone made him smile a little wider. He was used to people being formal or cautious around him, but this waitress spoke naturally, without any fear or flattery. There was something refreshing about that. He looked at her closely, noticing her tired eyes and the faint traces of exhaustion she tried to hide with her smile. She looked like someone who worked too hard but refused to complain. When Emma came back with a tray of clean cups, she noticed his tie again. It was still crooked, and this time she couldn't resist. "Sir," she said gently, "your tie is a little uneven." He blinked in surprise and looked down. "Is it?" he asked, amused. "Yes, just a little," she said, smiling. Then, before she could stop herself, she added, "Would you like me to fix it?" The man raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting that. But then, with a curious grin, he said, "Sure." Emma's cheeks turned pink. She stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly as she straightened the knot of his tie. The scent of his cologne was faint but rich, and for a second she felt nervous. Not because he was intimidating, but because she didn't usually do things like this. "There," she said, stepping back with a shy smile. "Perfect now." He chuckled softly. "You're quite observant," he said, his eyes warm with amusement. "Most people wouldn't even notice." Emma smiled. "Well, it's part of my job to notice small things. Details matter, in coffee and in ties." He laughed quietly at her response, clearly impressed by her confidence. "That's a good attitude," he said. "I like people who care about the little things." She nodded politely, not realizing that this small conversation, this tiny act of kindness, was the moment that would change everything. She walked away, thinking it was nothing, just a casual chat with a polite customer. But the man by the window kept watching her as she worked, curiosity growing in his mind. There was something rare about her, something honest, genuine, and warm that money couldn't buy. As the morning went on, he stayed longer than expected, occasionally glancing up from his paper just to watch how she interacted with others. She greeted everyone with the same kindness, never losing her patience, even when customers were rude. He noticed how she offered a smile to an old man struggling with his wallet, how she knelt to wipe a spill without calling for help. There was dignity in her simplicity, a quiet grace that intrigued him deeply. By the time he finished his coffee, he wasn't just impressed. He was inspired. He had come to the cafe only for a quick break before a meeting, but now he felt something unusual. Admiration for a stranger who didn't even know who he was. As he prepared to leave, he knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't forget this waitress. And soon, she would learn that sometimes, destiny hides behind the smallest gestures, like straightening a stranger's crooked tie. The cafe had quieted down after the morning rush, and the noise of clinking cups had softened into a peaceful rhythm. Emma wiped the counter with slow, steady movements, her mind drifting between thoughts of her mother and the stranger she had just served. The man by the window was still there, sipping his coffee and reading his newspaper, his expression calm but thoughtful. There was something different about him, something she couldn't quite name. He didn't act like the usual rich men she occasionally saw in the cafe. He had an air of quiet confidence, yet there was kindness in his eyes. Emma didn't think much of it. For her, he was just another customer who needed good service. But fate had other plans. Plans she couldn't imagine were unfolding at that very moment. As she walked past his table again, she noticed his tie had become crooked once more, maybe from adjusting his posture or reaching for his cup. She smiled to herself, amused at how such a well-dressed man could miss such a small detail. Most waitresses would ignore it, but Emma's natural instinct for neatness and her kind heart didn't allow her to walk away. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, stopping beside his table. The man looked up, surprised by her voice. "Your tie. It's a bit uneven again." He blinked, a little confused at first, then looked down at himself. Is it? Oh, I didn't notice. His tone carried mild amusement. Emma hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to sound rude or overstep her boundaries, but she also didn't want to let him walk around with his tie looking untidy. Gathering her courage, she asked, "Would you like me to fix it for you?" Her words hung in the air for a second, and then the man smiled. Not the kind of smile that came from politeness, but one that showed genuine curiosity. "You would do that?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his tone. Emma's cheeks turned slightly pink. "If you don't mind," she replied quietly. He leaned back a little, amused but interested. "Please go ahead." With gentle hands, Emma reached out to straighten the tie. She tried not to look nervous, but her heart was beating fast. She adjusted the knot carefully, making sure it sat perfectly in place. It was such a simple thing, yet in that moment, everything around her seemed to slow down. The noise of the cafe, the chatter, even the sound of the coffee machine. For the first time, the man truly looked at her, not as a waitress but as a person. He noticed her tired eyes, her slightly rough hands from hard work, and the calm determination on her face. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was simply doing what felt right. That honesty made her different. "There," Emma said finally, stepping back with a shy smile. "Perfect now." The man chuckled softly, still looking at her. "You're very observant," he said. "Not many people would notice such a small thing." Emma smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I guess I just like when things look right," she replied. "Even small things matter." Her words caught him off guard. "Even small things matter," he repeated thoughtfully, as if her simple sentence carried a deeper meaning. For a man who was used to living in a world of big deals and luxury, it was strange and refreshing to meet someone who saw value in the little things. Emma didn't think much of it. She gave him a polite nod and moved to another table to take an order. But he kept watching her quietly, his mind replaying that brief moment when her kindness touched him more than she could ever realize. As she worked, she continued to smile at customers, refill cups, and clear tables. To her, it was just another busy morning. But to him, it was different. He wasn't used to such genuine care from strangers. People around him were often polite because they wanted something: business, money, or favors. But this young woman had helped him out of pure kindness, without knowing who he was. He glanced at his reflection in the cafe window and saw his perfectly straightened tie. It made him chuckle quietly. "She has a good eye," he murmured to himself. A few minutes later, Emma returned to check if he needed anything else. "Would you like another cup of coffee, sir?" she asked with her usual warmth. He nodded, smiling. "Yes, please. And what's your name, if I may ask?" "Oh," Emma said, slightly surprised by the question. "It's Emma." "Emma," he repeated, as if trying to remember it. "That's a lovely name." She smiled shyly. "Thank you, sir. And yours?" "Daniel," he said after a short pause. "Daniel Bennett." She didn't recognize the name. To her, he was just Mr. Daniel, another kind customer. But if she had known who he really was, a billionaire businessman known across the city, she might have hesitated to even speak to him. Still, Daniel didn't tell her that. He wanted to see how far her kindness would go without the influence of his wealth. As she poured him another cup of coffee, Daniel asked casually, "You seem very dedicated to your work. Do you enjoy it?" Emma nodded. "It's not easy, but I'm grateful I have a job. It helps me take care of my mom. She's been unwell for a while." Something softened in his eyes. He could sense her sincerity. "That's very admirable," he said. "Most people would complain, but you speak with gratitude." Emma shrugged lightly. "Complaining won't change anything. Working hard might." Her words stayed with him long after she left to serve another customer. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Her humility, her honesty, her quiet strength. There was something rare about her spirit, something the world often overlooked. When Emma brought him the bill, Daniel didn't just see a waitress anymore. He saw potential, character, and grace that no amount of money could buy. He smiled at her and said, "You know, Emma, sometimes small acts of kindness can lead to big opportunities." She smiled back, not knowing what he truly meant. "I just like helping people," she said simply. As he stood up to leave, Daniel looked at her one last time. "Keep that kindness," he said. "It suits you." She nodded politely, thinking it was just a kind farewell. But Daniel walked out of the cafe with a plan forming in his mind. A plan that would soon change her life forever. Emma watched him leave, her heart strangely light. She didn't know why, but something about their short encounter made her feel hopeful. Maybe it was the smile he gave her, or maybe it was just the feeling that the universe had noticed her kindness. She turned back to her work, humming softly as the door closed behind him. To her, it was just a small moment. But little did she know, that simple act of fixing a stranger's tie had just opened a new chapter in her life. One filled with opportunities, surprises, and a destiny she never saw coming. Daniel Bennett sat quietly in his car after leaving the cafe, his hand resting on the steering wheel, but his mind far away. He couldn't stop thinking about the girl who had fixed his tie. Emma. There was something about her that stayed with him long after their short meeting. She wasn't just polite. She was genuine. In a world where most people treated him differently because of his money and power, Emma had seen him as just another customer. Her kindness had no motive, and that made it rare, precious, even. Daniel was a billionaire businessman, the owner of a massive company that managed luxury hotels, restaurants, and fashion brands. His name was famous in the business world, though he rarely showed off his wealth. People usually tried to impress him, flatter him, or gain something from him. But Emma had been different. She noticed his crooked tie, not his expensive suit. That small, thoughtful gesture made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: respect for someone's sincerity. Later that day, as he sat in his high-rise office surrounded by glass walls and polished marble floors, he found himself staring out the window at the busy city below. He couldn't shake the image of Emma's tired but warm smile. "Who is she?" he muttered to himself. He didn't know why he cared so much, but something about her simplicity had touched him deeply. Maybe it reminded him of where he had come from. Years ago, before Daniel became successful, he too had struggled. He had worked small jobs, cleaned tables, and delivered food just to make ends meet. He knew what it felt like to be ignored, to work hard and still feel invisible. Seeing Emma, with that same hard-working spirit, made him remember those difficult days. It stirred something inside him, a mix of admiration and compassion. That night, Daniel couldn't stop thinking. He wanted to know more about her story, her life, her dreams. Not because he was curious in a personal way, but because he felt that someone like her deserved more than the life she was living. "People like her shouldn't be stuck waiting tables forever," he said quietly to himself. "She deserves a real chance." The next morning, Daniel arrived at his office earlier than usual. His assistant, Clara, noticed the thoughtful look on his face. "Everything okay, sir?" she asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "Clara, I want you to find out something for me. There's a small cafe on Oak Street. I went there yesterday morning. Find out who works there, especially a young woman named Emma." Clara blinked in surprise. "Do you want to hire her or something?" "Maybe," Daniel said with a faint smile. "Just find out a little about her background first." By noon, Clara had gathered what little she could. Emma wasn't on social media much. She lived in a small apartment with her sick mother and had been working at the cafe for almost 3 years. Her record showed she never missed a shift, always arrived early, and often took extra hours when someone else called in sick. Daniel listened carefully as Clara spoke. Each fact about Emma made him more impressed. She wasn't just hardworking. She was selfless. She took care of her mother, lived modestly, and still found ways to smile every day. When Clara finished, Daniel sat back in his chair, lost in thought. "She's the kind of person I want in my company," he said finally. "Someone who pays attention, who cares. That's rare these days." Clara smiled softly. "Do you want me to contact her?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I'll do it myself." The next day, Daniel returned to the cafe. He wore a different suit this time, but his kind smile was the same. When Emma saw him walk in, she was surprised. She hadn't expected to see him again. She quickly grabbed a menu and walked to his table, feeling a mix of nervousness and curiosity. "Good morning, sir," she greeted. "The usual coffee?" Daniel smiled. "Yes, please. And maybe a few minutes of your time when you're free." Her heart skipped a beat. What could he possibly want to talk about? She nodded politely and went to prepare his order. When she returned, he put down his newspaper and looked up at her. "Emma, right?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, sir. I've been thinking about our little encounter the other day," he said with a smile. "Not many people would notice something as small as a crooked tie. You have an eye for detail, and that's something I admire." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "Oh, it was nothing, sir. I just like helping when I can." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "That's exactly what I mean. You helped without expecting anything in return. That's rare." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever praised her for something so small before. Usually, people didn't even notice her efforts. Then Daniel said something that completely caught her off guard. "Tell me, Emma, do you enjoy working here?" Her smile faltered for a moment. "I'm grateful for the job," she said honestly. "It helps me take care of my mom. But if I had a choice, I'd like to study again someday. Maybe work in an office, learn more, do something bigger." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he said quietly. "Someone who never stopped believing, even when life was unfair." She smiled softly. "I think hope is the only thing that keeps people like us going." He looked at her for a long moment before speaking again. "Emma, I own a company. It's not just about money. It's about people who can make a difference. And I think you're one of those people." Her eyes widened slightly. "I don't understand." Daniel smiled kindly. "You will," he said. "Would you be willing to come to my office tomorrow morning? I have something to discuss with you." Emma was speechless. "Your office?" she repeated, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, here's my card." He handed her a sleek white card with his name printed in gold letters. Daniel Bennett, CEO, Bennett Enterprises. She stared at the card, her hands shaking. She had no idea who he was until now. You're the owner?" she asked in disbelief. Daniel nodded calmly. "Yes, but more importantly, I'm someone who believes in giving chances to those who deserve them." Before she could reply, he smiled and stood up. "Think about it, Emma. I'll be waiting tomorrow morning." As he walked out, Emma stood frozen, staring at the business card. Her heart was racing. The man whose tie she had fixed was a billionaire, and he wanted to meet her, not as a customer, but as someone he saw potential in. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She kept replaying their conversation in her mind, wondering if it was all real. Maybe it was fate. Maybe her small act of kindness had finally brought something good back into her life. And though she didn't know what would happen next, one thing was certain. Her life was about to change forever. Emma hardly slept that night. She kept staring at the small white business card on her table, the gold letters shining softly under the dim light. Daniel Bennett, CEO, Bennett Enterprises. The name alone felt too big for her small world. Every time she looked at it, her heart beat faster. Was it really possible that a billionaire wanted to meet her? And for what? She was just a waitress who had fixed a stranger's tie. Nothing special, nothing powerful. The thought scared her and thrilled her at the same time. Her mother noticed how quiet she was that evening. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Emma hesitated, then told her everything. How the well-dressed man from the cafe turned out to be a billionaire and had asked her to visit his office the next morning. Her mother's eyes widened with surprise but soon softened into a gentle smile. "You see," she said warmly, "kindness always finds its way back. You never know what God has planned for you." "But, Mama," Emma said nervously, "what if it's just a joke? What if he was being polite?" Her mother took her hand. "You'll never know unless you go. Don't be afraid of good things, my dear. Maybe it's your turn to be blessed." That night, Emma ironed her only neat dress and polished her shoes until they looked new. She couldn't afford fancy clothes, but she wanted to look her best. When she finally lay down, sleep refused to come. Her thoughts kept racing. What if he offers me a small job? What if he just wanted to thank me? What if... This is my chance. The next morning, the sun was bright, and the city was alive with noise. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she rode the bus to the tall building written on the business card. When she reached it, she tilted her head back and looked up. The skyscraper seemed to touch the clouds. The glass walls reflected the sunlight like mirrors. She had never entered such a place in her life. For a moment, she almost turned back, her courage slipping away. But then she remembered her mother's words, "Don't be afraid of good things." So she took a deep breath and stepped through the revolving doors. Inside, everything gleamed. The marble floor shone under her feet, and the air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. The receptionist looked up with a polite smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Emma swallowed nervously. "I'm here to see Mr. Bennett. He asked me to come." The receptionist's expression changed instantly. "Of course, Mississippi, Mr. Bennett is expecting you." She made a quick call, then gestured toward the elevator. "Top floor, please. Someone will meet you there." As the elevator doors closed, Emma could feel her heart pounding. She looked at her reflection in the mirror-like walls, smoothing her dress and whispering to herself, "Stay calm. Just be yourself." When the doors opened, she stepped into a hallway lined with elegant paintings. A woman in a smart suit smiled at her. "Miss Emma? Please come with me. Mr. Bennett is waiting." Emma followed her into a large office with wide windows overlooking the city. Daniel Bennett was standing by the window, speaking on the phone. When he saw Emma, he smiled and ended the call. "You came," he said warmly. I wasn't sure if I should," Emma admitted, clutching her bag nervously. "I'm glad you did," he replied. "Please have a seat." The leather chair felt too soft, too expensive, and Emma sat carefully, afraid she might ruin it somehow. Daniel noticed her nervousness and smiled kindly. "Don't be nervous, Emma. This isn't an interview. I just wanted to talk." She nodded slowly. "You said you had something to discuss?" Daniel leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "When I met you at the cafe, you did something most people wouldn't bother doing. You fixed my tie. It was a small act, but it said a lot about you. You noticed something others ignored, and you cared enough to make it right." Emma blushed slightly. "I didn't think much of it, sir. I just wanted to help." "That's exactly why it mattered," Daniel said. "You did it without expecting anything in return. That's rare, especially in the world I live in." She looked down, unsure what to say. He continued, "I've been in business for years, and I've met many people. Smart, ambitious, talented, but very few are truly kind. You have that quality, and it's something I value more than any skill." Emma raised her eyes slowly, her voice soft. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot. But I'm not sure how that's connected to why I'm here." Daniel smiled. "It's simple. I want to offer you a job." Her eyes widened. "A job?" "Yes. I need a new personal assistant. Someone I can trust. Someone who pays attention to details and doesn't take kindness for weakness. And I think you'd be perfect for it." For a long moment, Emma just stared at him, unable to speak. Then she laughed nervously. "Sir, I think you might be mistaken. I'm just a waitress. I've never worked in an office before." Daniel chuckled softly. "I wasn't born a billionaire, Emma. Everyone starts somewhere. You have what can't be taught, sincerity and dedication. Everything else you can learn." Her heart raced. She didn't know whether to believe him or not. "But I don't know how to use fancy software or manage schedules." "We'll train you," Daniel interrupted gently. "What matters is your attitude. I see potential in you. You deserve a chance." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because," Daniel said softly, "you remind me of myself before success. You reminded me what true character looks like. And because sometimes, people like you just need one opportunity to change everything." Emma's throat tightened. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you. This means so much." He smiled kindly. "You can thank me by working hard, the same way you always have." They talked for a while longer, and Daniel explained the role, managing his appointments, helping with meetings, organizing files, and learning from his team. The salary he offered was far beyond anything Emma had ever imagined. It was enough to pay for her mother's treatment and still have savings left. When she finally left his office, her eyes were wet but shining. She stepped out of the building and looked up at the sky, her heart full of hope. The world suddenly seemed brighter, warmer, more welcoming. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. "Mama," she said, her voice trembling with joy. "You won't believe this. He offered me a job. A real job. I'm going to work for Mr. Bennett himself." Her mother gasped in disbelief, and then both of them started crying, laughing through their tears. For the first time in years, Emma felt like her life was finally changing. Like the clouds that had hung over her for so long were beginning to part. All because of one small act of kindness, fixing a stranger's tie. That simple moment had opened a door she never knew existed. And as Emma walked home that day, holding her mother's favorite flowers, she realized something important. When you do good without expecting anything back, life always finds a way to reward you. Sometimes in the most unexpected, beautiful ways. That night, Emma lay awake in her small room, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day kept replaying in her mind like a dream she couldn't believe was real. She had met a billionaire, someone powerful, confident, and kind, and he had offered her a job. A simple waitress who earned just enough to survive. The business card on her nightstand glimmered faintly under the soft light, as if reminding her that this was no dream. It was real. Still, a small voice inside her whispered doubts. What if he changes his mind tomorrow? What if he was just being polite? What if I can't do the job? The questions filled her mind until she felt her heart ache with uncertainty. Her mother, who had been resting in the next room, heard Emma turning in bed and softly called out, "Can't sleep, sweetheart?" Emma got up and sat beside her. "Mama," she whispered, "what if I'm not good enough for this? What if he realizes he made a mistake hiring me?" Her mother smiled weakly, her eyes gentle but filled with wisdom. "You've worked hard all your life, Emma. You may not have fancy clothes or college degrees, but you have something most people don't, heart. That's what he saw in you. Believe in yourself, just like he believed in you." Emma looked down, her voice trembling. "I'm scared. What if I disappoint him?" "You won't," her mother said softly, holding her hand. "You've always been brave, even when things were hardest. Remember when your father passed away, and you took care of me and still went to work every day? That courage will take you far. You deserve this chance." Tears filled Emma's eyes. Her mother's words felt like warm sunlight breaking through the clouds of her doubt. "You really think so?" "I know so," her mother said with a smile. "Sometimes, opportunities come when we least expect them. Don't let fear steal yours." That night, Emma finally managed to sleep. Her dreams were filled with hope and light, though somewhere deep inside, she still carried the weight of nervousness about stepping into a world that was completely different from her own. The next morning, the alarm rang early. Emma got out of bed quickly and dressed neatly. She wore her freshly ironed blouse and the black skirt she'd kept for special occasions. Her shoes were old, but she polished them until they shone. She tied her hair back in a simple ponytail and looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't see a waitress anymore. She saw someone ready to start a new chapter. As she prepared to leave, her mother kissed her forehead. "Go make us proud," she whispered. The city streets were busy as always, but today, they felt different. Emma noticed things she had never paid attention to before. The morning light bouncing off tall buildings, the sound of distant laughter, the smell of coffee from nearby shops. Everything seemed brighter because she was filled with new hope. When she reached the grand building where Mr. Bennett's office was, she paused outside for a moment. It was still overwhelming. The glass walls, the revolving doors, the busy people walking in and out in their expensive suits. For a second, she almost turned back. She thought, "I don't belong here." But then she remembered her mother's words. "Don't let fear steal your chance." She took a deep breath and walked in. The marble floors sparkled under the soft lights, and she could hear the faint sound of heels clicking against the tiles. The receptionist recognized her instantly and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Miss Emma. Mr. Bennett is waiting for you upstairs." Emma nodded politely, clutching her small handbag tightly as she stepped into the elevator. The ride to the top floor felt like forever. Her heart raced, and she kept smoothing her skirt nervously. What if I say something wrong? What if he asks me something I don't know? When the elevator doors opened, she was greeted by the same kind woman from yesterday, who smiled and led her to Mr. Bennett's office. Emma took a deep breath before stepping inside. Daniel Bennett was standing near his desk, speaking with another man in a dark suit. When he saw Emma, he smiled warmly. "Ah, Emma, right on time." "Good morning, sir," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Come in," he said, gesturing toward the chair opposite him. Once she sat, he dismissed the man and turned his full attention to her. "I'm glad you decided to come. I almost didn't," Emma admitted honestly. "It felt too good to be true." Daniel chuckled softly. "Most good things do. But sometimes, you have to trust that life is giving you what you deserve." Emma smiled nervously, feeling the tension slowly melt away. "Thank you again for this opportunity. I'll try my best not to disappoint you." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with a thoughtful expression. "I don't doubt that for a second. You'll learn everything you need to know. My assistant, Clara, will train you for the first few weeks. You'll manage appointments, handle calls, and help organize meetings. It'll be a lot at first, but I know you can handle it." Emma nodded eagerly. "I'll do everything I can, sir." Daniel smiled. "Good. And remember, don't try to be perfect. Just be sincere. That's what brought you here in the first place." As the day went on, Clara showed Emma around the office. Everything was new to her. The sound of printers, the buzz of phones, the typing of keyboards, and the soft chatter of professionals who seemed to belong to another world. Still, she tried her best to absorb everything. Clara was kind and patient, explaining each task carefully. By lunchtime, Emma was exhausted but excited. She couldn't stop smiling. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to rebuild her life. She could already imagine her mother smiling at home, proud and relieved. Later that afternoon, Daniel called her into his office again. "How was your first day?" he asked with a kind smile. "It's amazing, sir," she said, her eyes glowing. "I still can't believe I'm here." He smiled gently. "Believe it, Emma. You earned it." When the day finally ended, Emma stepped out of the building and looked at the setting sun painting the sky orange and pink. The wind brushed against her face, and she closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. For the first time in a long time, she felt free from fear, from doubt, from the weight of endless struggles. The city lights began to glow as she walked home, her steps lighter than ever before. That evening, she sat with her mother and told her everything about her first day. Her mother listened with tears in her eyes, holding Emma's hand tightly. "See, my dear? I told you, the world always rewards a pure heart." Emma smiled through her tears. She knew now that every act of kindness mattered, even the smallest ones. Her journey was just beginning, but she had already learned one of life's greatest lessons. When you choose to do good, the universe finds a way to return it, often in the most magical, unexpected ways. And deep down, she silently promised herself that no matter how far she went, she would never stop being the same girl who once fixed a stranger's tie out of simple kindness. Emma's life began to change faster than she could have ever imagined. Each morning, she woke up before sunrise, made breakfast for her mother, and left for work with a heart full of excitement and nervousness. The first few weeks as Mr. Bennett's assistant were not easy. She had to learn how to manage meetings, answer important phone calls, and deal with people who were far more confident and experienced than her. Sometimes she made mistakes, forgot to send an email, misplaced a document, or stuttered while talking to clients. But every time she fell, she picked herself back up and tried again. Mr. Bennett noticed her efforts. He never scolded her harshly. Instead, he guided her patiently. "Don't be afraid of mistakes, Emma. he told her once when she looked ready to cry after sending the wrong report. What matters is how quickly you fix them and what you learn from them. His words gave her courage. She started keeping a small notebook where she wrote down every detail she needed to remember. Slowly, her confidence began to grow. One day, Mr. Bennett called her into his office. "Emma," he said, smiling warmly, "you've been doing a wonderful job. I'm impressed." She looked surprised. "Really, sir? I still feel like I'm learning." "That's what makes you good," he replied. "You're always ready to learn. Many people stop growing once they think they know enough. You, on the other hand, are humble, and that's rare." Those words stayed with her. From that day, she worked even harder. She started coming in early to prepare Mr. Bennett's schedule and stayed late to organize the next day's files. The other employees noticed her dedication. Some admired her. Others whispered about how lucky she was to have been chosen by the boss himself. But Emma didn't care what anyone said. She wasn't there because of luck. She was there because of kindness, honesty, and hard work. One afternoon, while preparing coffee for an important board meeting, Emma overheard a few executives talking. "She used to be a waitress," one man said in disbelief. "Can you imagine that? And now she's the assistant to the CEO." Another laughed quietly. "Mr. Bennett must really see something special in her." Emma smiled to herself. She wasn't ashamed of where she came from. That cafe had taught her discipline, patience, and humility, qualities that now helped her in the corporate world. She carried her past like a badge of honor, not a burden. A few weeks later, the company organized a charity event. Mr. Bennett was supposed to give a speech, but at the last minute, an urgent business call pulled him away. He turned to Emma and said, "Can you handle this for me? Just welcome the guests and thank them for their support." Emma froze. "Me? But, sir, I've never spoken in front of a crowd before." He smiled calmly. "You'll do fine. Just speak from your heart." Her hands trembled as she stepped up to the microphone. The room was full of wealthy businessmen and elegant women in sparkling gowns. For a moment, her voice refused to come out. But then she remembered Mr. Bennett's advice, "Speak from your heart." So she took a deep breath and began, "Good evening, everyone. Mr. Bennett had to step out for an important call, but he asked me to thank you all for being here. I may not have fancy words, but I do know one thing. Kindness changes lives. It changed mine." The crowd went silent. Emma continued, her voice stronger now. "A few months ago, I was working as a waitress in a small cafe. I met a kind stranger who taught me that one simple act of kindness can open doors you never imagined. Tonight, as we help others through this charity, I hope we all remember that kindness doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be real." When she finished, the audience burst into applause. Emma's cheeks turned red, but she smiled. Mr. Bennett, who had returned quietly during her speech, watched from the doorway, proud and touched. Later, he said softly, "You spoke beautifully, Emma. That's exactly what this world needs. More people like you." Her confidence grew even more after that day. She began to handle more responsibilities, and Mr. Bennett trusted her completely. She helped him with presentations, managed his travel plans, and even offered new ideas for improving the company's community programs. Every task she took on, she did with dedication and care. One evening, as they were finishing up work, Mr. Bennett looked at her and said, "You know, Emma, when I first met you at that cafe, I didn't just see a waitress. I saw someone with strength, kindness, and potential. You reminded me of myself when I started my journey." Emma was touched. "You?" she asked in disbelief. "But you've always been successful, sir." He chuckled. "Not at all. I came from nothing. I know what it's like to work hard and be overlooked. That's why I value people like you. People who never give up, no matter how hard life gets." His words warmed her heart. For the first time, Emma realized that success wasn't just about money or titles. It was about the kind of person you became along the way. As the months passed, Emma's life changed completely. She paid off her mother's hospital bills and moved her into a small but comfortable apartment. Her mother's health improved, and she often told Emma, "You've become my greatest pride." Sometimes, when Emma walked past the cafe where she used to work, she stopped for a moment to look inside. The smell of coffee and the laughter of customers brought back memories of her struggles. But instead of sadness, she felt gratitude. Every hardship had led her to that one fateful day when she fixed a stranger's tie, and that small act had rewritten her destiny. One Friday evening, Mr. Bennett called her into his office again. He had a warm smile on his face. "Emma," he said, "I've been thinking. I want to promote you to executive assistant. You've more than earned it." Her eyes widened, and she gasped softly. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said with a grin. "You've proven yourself time and time again. I'm proud of you." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she nodded. "Thank you, sir, for everything." He shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself for having the courage to be kind, even when life wasn't kind to you." That night, as Emma walked home under the glowing city lights, she felt tears on her cheeks. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. She had learned that real success isn't about where you start. It's about how much heart you put into every step of the journey. And as she looked up at the stars, she whispered to herself, "All of this began with one small act of kindness. One moment that changed my life forever." Months passed, and Emma's life became something she had never dared to dream of before. Every morning, when she looked in the mirror before leaving for work, she no longer saw a tired, struggling waitress. She saw a confident, hard-working young woman who had built herself up from nothing. Someone who had turned a small act of kindness into a whole new life. Her new office was bright and filled with energy. She had her own desk now, right outside Mr. Bennett's door, and people respected her. Employees who once whispered about her past now came to her for advice. They admired how organized and humble she remained, even as her position grew. Emma never forgot what it felt like to have nothing, so she treated everyone, from the cleaning staff to the senior managers, with the same kindness she showed that day in the cafe. Mr. Bennett often noticed how she handled difficult situations with calm and grace. Once, during a company crisis when a client backed out of an important deal, Emma stayed late with the team to help sort out the mess. She made coffee for everyone, organized documents, and even encouraged them when they felt tired. "We'll fix this," she said with a smile. "One step at a time." Her words gave everyone strength. By morning, they had found a solution, and Mr. Bennett couldn't stop praising her. "You've become the heart of this company, Emma," he told her sincerely. Her mother's health also improved greatly. The new apartment they moved into was small but beautiful, with sunlight streaming through the windows and flowers on the balcony. Every evening, Emma brought her favorite pastries from work, and they would sit together, laughing, sharing stories, and talking about how far they had come. Her mother often said, "I always knew you were meant for something great, my dear. You just needed the right person to see it." Emma would smile and reply softly, "And I'll spend my life making sure I deserve it." One weekend, Mr. Bennett invited Emma and a few employees to a charity gala, the same kind of event she used to see only from a distance. She wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, and when she walked into the grand hall filled with sparkling lights and elegant people, she felt nervous again for a moment. But then she reminded herself, "I've earned my place here." During the evening, a well-known businesswoman approached her and said, "I've heard a lot about you, Miss Emma. You're the one Mr. Bennett speaks so highly of." Emma blushed, not knowing what to say. "He's very kind," she replied politely. The woman smiled. "You must have done something remarkable to earn his respect. Not everyone gets that." Emma smiled faintly. "I just believe in doing my best and being kind. That's all." The woman nodded approvingly. "That's a rare quality. Hold on to it." As the night went on, Emma stood beside Mr. Bennett as he gave his speech. When he talked about success, he didn't mention profits or business deals. Instead, he spoke about compassion. "Success," he said, "is not just about what you gain, but what you give. It's about seeing value in people who others overlook. And sometimes, it's about how a small act, even something as simple as fixing a tie, can remind us that greatness begins with kindness." Everyone clapped, and Emma felt her eyes well up. She realized he was talking about her. She looked down shyly, her heart full of gratitude. Later that night, when the gala ended, Mr. Bennet walked her to her car. "You know, Emma," he said with a soft smile, "you've come a long way since that morning in the cafe." She smiled back. "It feels like a lifetime ago, sir." He nodded. "It's funny how life works. I went into that cafe just to grab a coffee. I walked out with one of the most dedicated people I've ever met." Emma laughed lightly, though her eyes were misty. "And I just wanted to fix a tie." They both smiled, sharing that unspoken understanding, that some moments are small on the outside but life-changing on the inside. As the weeks rolled by, Emma continued to shine. Her ideas started making real changes in the company. She suggested new ways to help small businesses and hire young people who needed opportunities like she once did. Mr. Bennet supported her completely, proud of the woman she had become. Soon, she was put in charge of organizing the company's outreach programs, helping dozens of people find work and stability. One day, as she sat at her desk reviewing a list of new hires, she saw a familiar name, Lily, one of her old coworkers from the cafe. She smiled warmly and decided to call her. "Hi, Lily. It's Emma, yes, from the cafe. I just wanted to say, welcome to Bennett Enterprises." On the other end of the call, Lily was stunned. "Emma? Wait, you work there?" Emma laughed. "I do. And now, so do you. Let's grab lunch soon. Okay?" After she hung up, Emma leaned back in her chair, her heart swelling with joy. She wasn't just changing her own life. She was helping others too. That evening, she took her mother for a walk in the park. The sky was painted in soft shades of gold and pink, and the cool breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Her mother held her hand and said, "You see, my dear, one small act of kindness created all of this. Never forget that." "I never will," Emma said softly. "It's what started everything." Her mother smiled. "You've proved that you don't need to be rich to make a difference. Just kind." Emma looked up at the glowing city skyline. The same streets that once made her feel invisible now felt like home. Every light, every sound reminded her of how far she had come. From a poor waitress with trembling hands to a confident woman standing tall in a world that once seemed unreachable. As they sat on a bench watching the sunset, Emma whispered, "If I ever meet someone like me, scared, struggling, unsure, I'll tell them this. Never stop being kind, because kindness has a way of coming back to you, even when you least expect it." Her mother smiled proudly. "That's my girl." And in that peaceful moment, as the sun disappeared behind the buildings, Emma felt a deep sense of peace. Her journey had taught her that miracles don't always come in grand ways. Sometimes, they come quietly, disguised as ordinary moments. A smile, a kind word, a small gesture. She had once fixed a stranger's tie without thinking much of it, and that one simple act had changed everything. It had turned her struggles into strength, her pain into purpose, and her dreams into reality. Now, Emma was living proof that no act of kindness is ever wasted, because sometimes the smallest good deed can change your whole life forever.